So this is a topic that I'm passionate about, diversity sourcing and making sure that as we apply or practice talent acquisition, that we're creating a positive candidate experience. Earlier on in my career, I used to work in the agency world, and I learned how a bad candidate experience can really ruin not only someone's career but also your reputation, the company's reputation, and it leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And I know a lot of people are in the job market right now, especially as some of the stats that John shared about a million jobs being lost in the U.S. A lot of people are in the market, so I think it's very important that we play our part in talent acquisition to be intentional and to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And the old adage of, walk a mile in someone else's shoes to understand what their experience is like, and to do everything in our power to be intentional and to assist with that. So this is not going to be, this is going to be a little bit higher level, but some strategies and things that you can use to employ. And basically, what I tried to do with this is to tie together sourcing with creating a positive candidate experience. And there's some strategies and tactics and things to think about as you go about doing this. And I know a lot of recent legislation and things have impacted, I think, progress that's been made in our industry. It almost seems like we're going back in time a little bit. I know a lot of folks, talent acquisition practitioners, that have been directly impacted as a result of some of the, again, changes and things that are happening in the marketplace. So, oops. So these topics are important because diversity sourcing without a good experience, there's going to be massive drop off. And if you have experience without diversity, then you have inequity, right? And diversity, I don't think I need to share, but companies want to represent the populations in the areas that they do business in, their customer base, and so forth. There's been numerous studies that have shown that diverse teams outperform, regular teams. And, also not only the monetary reasons, but I think it builds for a better work environment where you truly get to meet different people and work with some great people of all different backgrounds. So without representation and trust, you can't make this happen. So the real goal here is going to be focusing on your top of funnel, right? So you want to make sure that someone's first interaction with your company makes them feel welcome and it's a place where they belong. And there's numerous examples of stories where candidates have bad experiences, and then somebody writes a bad review, and it just makes for a more painful process. So you do have to be intentional when it comes to this intention. One of the ways that you can go about doing this is focusing on your top of funnel. So in sourcing, we focus on the top of funnel. So we have a big opportunity to have a big impact and really help change this. Make sure that diverse representation is shared within your candidates that are being presented to the hiring managers. So don't think of this as a quota or anything like that. Think of this as, goals, right? And you're using this as a way of being intentional and making sure that you're producing a diverse slate of folks in your top of funnel. So from what I was reading, some of the best practitioners suggest, like a targeted, a goal of about 30 to 40% underrepresented group is what the EORG stands for. And this is going to vary depending upon the region and the role. Certain cities, for example, are going to have lower populations of different groups than others. So, for example, Seattle has a lower African American community than, for example, Atlanta or Detroit. But you just basically use research and your tools you have access to. Department of Labor data, and Aaron Matthew posted in the chat some research tools that you have access to on a Start Me page. So definitely take a look at that. It'll be able to assist you with some of this. So instead of just running out and, throwing out strings and, going to LinkedIn Recruiter and just, dumping all the profiles in there, take a step back and think about the different diverse communities that your company is trying to connect with, right? And be intentional. This is your opportunity to do that. So you can identify if you're recruiting for tech roles, for example. There's women in tech. There's Grace Hopper. There's women who code, etc. There's a numerous ones of those. So think about diversity groups that you relationships you have maybe already in place with your within your company, or also that you can connect with and explore, and then focus on building a persona. Persona is basically what does that look like for someone who does that in that role, and how can you filter that in to make sure that you're again attracting the profile versus reading a job description. And then once you have that, then add the technical skills and the other skills to it, so that way you're going to have you're going to have a different outcome basically because you're being intentional with doing that. So and then afterward, make sure that your outreach is inclusive and builds trust and transparent and helps you know make people feel comfortable and welcoming. Um, when it comes to some of the other areas that you can do this in, obviously Boolean search is a great way to do that. So take the different affinity groups and accessibility groups and veteran groups and so forth that you identify, and turn those into strings that you can then add with your key skills. So here's some examples in here. I do know that there are some typos and whatnot, and thank you AI for generating some of that. So just know that it's just a massive or string, and there should be quotes around, for example, these two words here. Um, and then I just use software engineering as an example. So the technical skills, React, Node, TypeScript, would be in conjunction with your DEI, your diversity affinity groups. So in this case, AfroTech, Grace Hopper, SHPE, and Lesbians Who Tech. And by using this, it's going to make sure that you're returning those folks in addition to the ones that have the skill sets. Go beyond LinkedIn. LinkedIn is great and all, but there's many other places and partnerships and so forth that you want to make sure that you're exploring. So here are some ones that I came up with just as doing some research and ones I knew about. So if you aren't familiar with these, and there's many others, I would encourage you to explore them, see if you have partnerships already. And there's many different ones out there. Again, I do mostly tech, so that's why I have mostly tech in here. But if you have, if you're in healthcare or if you're in sales, I know there's Sistas in Sales is one that I've partnered with in the past. His Society of Hispanic Engineers. There's Nishimba National Society of Hispanic MBAs, and so forth and so on. So when it comes to doing this, or being transparency is number one. So you want to make sure that you are clear and articulate, and you're establishing trust. So you want candidates to see that you're being transparent, that that they're welcome, that they feel belonged, and that it's a safe place to be themselves and represent who they are and be themselves. So make sure that in your process that you are that who you're reaching out to, that they know who you are, that you're transparent with what the process looks like, that they know that the environment is safe, and that they know it's worth their time investing, in this process and going into your process, so that way they're not going to, be discouraged or, have a bad experience again. And think about the psychology and your ability to, be structured and make sure that everything is clear and articulate. And that when you're sending your outreach, that you're making sure that you're being respectful of the person, and that you're being personalized, and you're showcasing what the trajectory could look like and not just a pedigree. Again, transparent expectations. What can they expect? What are you looking for? And that if they decide it's not a fit for them, that it's okay to say no. Also acknowledge that there is bias that's in the industry, and that you want to make sure that you're doing everything in your power to make sure you have a fair and equitable process in terms of where they can put their best selves forward without having to, experience what maybe some of the things that they have in the past, right? Again, being transparent, and that you're explaining the process so they know exactly what they're walking into and they can be as prepared as possible. And you want to do everything in your power to remove the friction from your process. So it's not enough to just talk about it, but it's enough to, you want to make sure that you're doing everything in your process and that everything has been, scrubbed and designed and, clearly states what it is that you're attempting to. So make sure that you don't have any, non welcoming language in your job descriptions, that your job descriptions are inviting, that they're clear, that you are, creating or you're not using words and terms that are, genderfied, and there's resources that are in the community that can help you with that. And that you're speaking to everybody, and that you're again being as inviting as you possibly can, and that there's nothing that stands out that is going to have adverse impact on different communities. And if you're when it comes to interviews, you want to make sure that you have, clear interview loops and that people are, getting a diverse perspective of what it's like. I know sometimes this might be a little bit difficult if you don't have, if you're a smaller company or if you're trying to figure out what your loop panels are going to look like, but try to be intentional. And, internally within a lot of companies, you have ERGs, BRGs that you can work with that can be great resources for you that can help, do that. And sometimes you may not have like an expert that's in that space, but make it an option to have people speak with folks or members of the ERG, BRGs that you have access to. And I know that goes a long way with being able to answer questions, make people feel comfortable, and again, invited and welcome. When it comes to take-home tests, make sure that they're accessible and that you're taking into account all everyone. I know this disabled community I know is one of the least employed, and sometimes some of the assessments and things that I've seen out there, may not be designed to maybe have some adverse impact as part of it. So make sure that you have as part of your program that if somebody needs assistance, that they can reach out to you to make that clear, so that way they can get the assistance they need, so they can put their best selves forward. Also, make sure that you're have clear timelines and that everything flows within a realistic time frame. And then again, those expectations are known, right? So if you say you're going to get back to someone and they'll hear back within 3 days, make sure you respond back within 3 days. And then we're people are human, so make sure that if somebody's not going to be moving forward in the process, that you ideally let them know. The general rule I like to use is if somebody interviewed with you, that you close the loop with them, yourself, right? Through a phone call or something of that sort. And that, the generic, oh, thanks, but no thanks emails, while it's better than not getting anything, I think that little extra effort there, I think goes a long way. And it helps, again, make people feel valued and that they didn't waste their time. Because there's a lot of frustrated job seekers out there, and we want to make sure that, again, the candidate experience is positive, and every little thing that we can do that we have control over adds up over time, and you want to be intentional again. So again, transparency equals inclusion. So who they meet, the timeline, what good looks like, think about it all and make sure it's designed to put your best self forward. If you do identify things that are not conducive to your overall strategy, make sure that you are using your surveys and whatnot that you send out to candidates. There's a lot of data that comes in there. Work with your partners in different organizations across HR, hiring managers. Make sure that there's interviewing training. Help educate and provide the tools and resources that your TA teams and hiring managers and HR partners can utilize, again, so that way this can be as streamlined as possible, and that you're doing everything you can to eliminate the things that you may not be aware of. So when it comes to another way of reducing bias, a scorecard, I think, is a great way to do that. And this will help you, again, take a job description that may be vague and focus on the specifics that are needed in the role, right? So that way you can stay objective. And I highly recommend that you also utilize a rubric, because a rubric is your single source of truth and it keeps everything grounded in the same general area. So a scorecard is basically built off of that typically, and you can use it as a way of again of being objective, right? So if certain skills are important, make sure that's in there. But again, use this as a way of to stay on task and to be objective and not, oh, so and so has this on their resume. Oh, I'm not comfortable with that moving forward, right? That gets you into the bias stages, and you want to avoid all that. So again, data driven. Make sure it's a streamlined process, and a scorecard will help you do that. Micro communities, not pipelines. So when it comes to some of the affinity groups and things of that sort, make sure you have partnerships in place with these organizations, and you will be able to find them in different areas. Sometimes they may not be large in different areas. A lot of these types of groups they'll either be local, regional, national. Some of them are international. So if you don't see it local, look regional. If you don't see it regional, look national and international. A lot of these groups will also have websites and conferences and things of that sort. So a great way that you can build awareness and be intentional and deliberate is you can build partnerships with them. Host events maybe at your company, or be a sponsor at one of their national or their local, regional, whatever conferences. Be a speaker, have somebody from your company speak there. Show that you're involved, be intentional, be authentic, and don't just do it just because you want to check a box, right? You want to be genuine, and you want to be vested in this. It's a partnership, and that's the way you should look at it. So again, within your internal ERGs, BRGs, if you're a larger company, if you're a smaller, medium-sized company, these resources may not exist. I would highly recommend that you consider this, and partner with experts in this space that can help you develop that, because they are very valuable, and especially in large companies, these are very strategic partners for talent acquisition and HR. And it's a great way to again build community and be able to strategically work together towards that common goal of making sure that you're being intentional with your efforts and goals. So some of the ways you can collaborate with these groups is on candidate referrals, reviewing job description tones, validating prospect personas, reviewing it, say, hey, does this look like does this sound like somebody, that would be comfortable in this space? Is there anything we should change? Get the feedback, right? Collaborate. Assistant outreach events, helping redesign interview loops, and just getting the perspective that you don't otherwise have, because again, this is very important, and I think we have to be intentional and make sure to do this. Also make sure that you are doing safety checks and kind of auditing this, and asking yourself, would someone from an ERG feel welcome? Would they feel informed? Would they feel respected? And would they trust the process? So some things to think about right now is, what are some quick wins that you can implement tomorrow? What are some ways you can rewrite some outreach messages with inclusive language? What can you add to your DEI focused Boolean templates or toolkits? What kind of top of funnel diversity goals can you share with hiring managers? How can you go about building new partnerships with different affinity groups or areas in your environment? Does your company provide a candidate bill of right? Think through these things and be intentional with your design. So in closing, diversity finds people, experience keeps them engaged, and you want to make sure that you incorporate diverse sourcing into all aspects of your candidate search, whether you're a recruiter or whether you're a sourcer, whether you're internal, whether you're an agency, whether you're a contract recruiter, or whether you're somewhere in between. It's our responsibility, and we should be intentional, and we should care, because that comes across, and it's something that's extremely important.